Hello everyone, welcome back to another video lesson. Today is my last lesson for Aviation 410 and we're talking about my favorite thing to do in an airplane, the slip to land. Now I got halfway through writing this information and putting an outline on this beautiful makeshift marker board here made of cardboard when I realized you probably can't see it. So we're going to use this just mainly for my track of flow to make sure I'm going through everything I want to talk about. But I'm going to use my iPad for the lesson plan. So if you want to follow along, make sure you pull up my lesson plan as we go. Let's talk about the outline here before we get started. We're going to look at some resources that I use to get this information that you should check on to learn how to do a slip to land. We're going to look over some definitions so we know what we're talking about. We're going to talk about the rationale. Mainly in the rationale, we're going to look at the aerodynamic principles in play during this procedure or this maneuver, however you want to call it. We're going to look at how to perform the slip to landing, some common errors, the ACS standards, and then we're going to conclude and just wrap up everything that we've talked about. Now let me set the scene for you before you get started. It's a blistery day. You have a strong 10 to 15 knot wind on your tail as you're flying downwind for the landing at Lynchburg Airport. You know this means that when you turn base, you're going to get blown out a little farther than you normally would, and that means you're probably going to want to turn in sooner. So you make your call to tower, you get permission to do your normal pattern at Lynchburg, and you turn base sooner than you normally would. You look out to your left, you see the Pappies there, or the Vassies, whatever you're looking at if you're not at Lynchburg, and you see that you're coming in looking just on track. You look to your right and you can see that everything's clear, so you make the decision to go ahead and turn base to final, and that's when it hits you. You're too high, and you have 4 white lights staring straight at you, but not only that, you're also too close to the runway to make a normal descent to landing. You have lots of thoughts going through your head and you're probably thinking to yourself, oh shoot, because you're at liberty. What do? At this point, you really have 2 options. The first option is always the safest option, and that's a go-around. Full power, retract the flaps, and climb out like normal to give it another shot. The second option is what's going to be called a slip to land. Now again, at this point, your private training, I know you probably have bells and whistles going off in your head saying, wait a minute, Brett. Aren't skids and slips bad when flying? Normally that means your passengers are in the back with their face pressed against the glass because I'm doing a Jason Bourne drift around the corner. Slow down, we're going to teach you everything you need to know. That's why we're going to look at some of these definitions. The resources first, look at Bold Method. If you like visual images, that's where you can get a lot of this information. You can also find great information in the Airplane Flying Handbook. That's where I get a lot of my definitions from. So use those 2 sources for your information. You can also look at AOPA. They have great references as well. But now let's look at some definitions. So a slip is defined as a combination of a forward movement and a sideward with respect to the longitudinal axis of the airplane movement. The lateral axis being inclined and the sideward movement being towards the low end of the axis. Just wait, let me get through the definitions and I will explain what all this means. Intentional slips are a slip that occurs when the bank angle of an airplane is too steep for the existing rate of turn. A forward slip is a slip which the airplane's direction of motion continues the same as before the slip begun. In a forward slip, the airplane's longitudinal axis is at an angle to its flight path. And a side slip, which an airplane's longitudinal axis remains parallel to the original flight plan, but the airplane no longer flies straight ahead. Instead, the horizontal component of the wing lift forces the airplane also to move somewhat sideways towards the low wing. It is entered by lowering a wing and applying just enough opposite rudder to prevent a turn. Now I know that's a lot of information and you probably don't understand it all, so let me try to break it down for you a little bit here using my miniature airplane. A slip, when it says, is basically just slipping into a turn. So if I were to make a normal turn flying straight ahead at you, I would bank to the left. And I would keep my rudder coordinated and I would make a smooth bank turn. Now when you're doing a slip, you're not staying coordinated with the rudder, so instead of banking and turning, you're actually going to slip through your turn. The difference between an intentional slip and like a slip or a skid that's wrong while flying is that this one you're doing on purpose. So you are purposefully slipping the aircraft instead of trying to turn and just not maintaining rudder, so you're skidding or you're slipping through the turn. So the forward slip is going to be a slip where you are faced, your nose is faced forward, you bank and you slip while going forward. Normally that means you're going to lose altitude, but your nose stays straight. You're slipping while your nose stays straight, you're losing altitude. A side slip means that you're sideways. It's a little bit of both if you want to think about it. It's a forward slip because you're moving forward, but you're slipping sideways, so you're sideways, like skidding through the air almost sideways like that, if you can get a good reference for it. That's pretty much the definitions that you need to know. I hope that understands. When we get in the airplane, we'll show you a little bit more demonstration. But now we're going to talk about the rationale of this. There's a lot of aerodynamics that you can get into with this. It's really fascinating. But essentially what you need to know is that, let's see, I'll find the exact spots here. That slips are characterized by a marked increase in drag and corresponding decrease in airplane climb, cruise, and glide performance. You're not going to get as good performance when you're slipping because you get more drag. And again, I got some great images in my lesson plan to show you. But if you're flying straight, you're clean. You're not going to have any wind or parasite drag or things like that affecting your flow. You start slipping or doing a forward slip, you're going to start putting portions of the aircraft into the wind that you're not used to, and that's going to give you more drag. That's why, as we'll show you now, you can get down to landing much quicker while using a slip. So performing the actual slip to land. To enter a forward slip, you're first going to bring the power to idle and make sure you're fully configured with the landing for full flaps if the manufacturer allows it, which for the Skyhawk 172, this airplane and what you'll be flying, it is allowed. You're going to, using the ailerons, lower the wing on the side of direction you want to slip. So you're going to want to slip into the wind. So let's say my wind is coming from the left here. So I'm going to want to bank my aileron into the left. I'm then simultaneously going to want to apply yaw to the airplane's nose in the opposite direction by applying the opposite rudder. That means I'm going to step on the rudder enough so that you can maintain a straight ground track towards the runway. Now your yaw is going to be opposite of your slip. So if I bank to the left, I'm going to step on right rudder, and that's going to swing my nose. See, I'm going sideways now. I'm performing a side slip like we talked about in the definition. You're then going to want to make sure that you keep your pitch for about 3 degrees nose down, and you're going to maintain this sideward slip all the way down to your runway. Now this is where some of the common errors come into play. According to the FAA handbook, some aircraft's pitot tubes can be ineffective while in a slide slip. Because of the way that the pitot tubes measures your airspeed, as you've already learned about in previous lessons, you could not have proper ram pressure, which means that your indication could be wrong and you could not actually be the right speed that you think you are or that's indicated. You could be going faster or slower. For this reason, you want to use the slip to get down to your altitude, maintaining the same pitch as you normally would. With more drag, as we already talked about, you're going to fall out of the sky faster. You don't really need the pitch as much. Once you get down to where your lights are lined up, you see your two whites and your 2 reds, and your normal sight picture is aligned, you're going to roll out, so you're going to release your slip and take your rudder, back to neutral and level out again with your 3 degrees nose down, just going back into normal descent to landing. This is when your airspeed is going to come back to your accurate measurement. If you do the side slip to land properly, you'll come out pretty much right on the airspeed that you entered it. However, if you pitch down too much or you leave the power in or anything like that, you're going to find yourself excessively fast on the final approach crossing the threshold. This means you're going to float longer, and this is one of the common errors, not maintaining the correct airspeed. You also can have issues with taking it out too soon or too late. If I take the slip out when I'm still too high, I'm not going to be able to make it down because I'll have to put the slip back in and try to descend, and it's just going to be too ugly and too dangerous. At that point, you're just going to want to go around. So timing and airspeed are your biggest things when doing a slip to land. This all sounds confusing, but it's really not that bad. This is one of those things that practice makes perfect, and you want to actually get in the airplane and test it out and practice it over and over. We can sit here and talk about it and we can chair fly, but practice makes perfect in this situation. Now, for ACS standards, what are you going to be expected to do? There's actually a whole section in the private pilot ACS of what you're going to do, but the FAA uses a catch-all to define what you're going to be graded on, and that is to determine that the student exhibits satisfactory knowledge, risk management, and skills associated with a forward slip to land. Depending on who your examiner is, you might not have to demonstrate this. I did have to demonstrate this for my private pilot check ride, and all that they want to make sure that you can do is that you're still maintaining good communication, good airmanship, and that you all have total mastery of the maneuver. They want to see you recognize that you need a slip to descend. They want to see you bank into the correct wind, apply opposite rudder, maintain your normal pitch attitude as you fall through the sky, recover when you're back onto your glide slope or your visual sight that you see for your good guidance down, release the rudder, roll the wings back to level, and maintain your airspeed. The reason this is so difficult, and another, not really a common error, but something you're going to want to watch out for when we get in the airplane, is that during this time you are in what's called the region of reverse command. Now, what is that? That seems like a fancy word we didn't talk about in definitions. The region of reverse command is where your flight controls, your power and aileron pitch movements are reversed. Now that doesn't mean that you pitch down, you're actually going to go up. It means that the purpose is. So let's simplify this. If I'm flying straight and level, what happens when I pitch the nose up? Well, when I pitch the nose up, normally that means I'm going to gain altitude. Or if I pitch the nose down, I'm going to decrease altitude. Additionally, if I add power, I'm normally going to get faster, and if I pull power, I'm going to get slower relatively. When you're in a region of reverse command, these controls swap. So if I lower the nose within the region of reverse command, I'm going to gain airspeed. If I raise the nose, I'm going to lose airspeed. I'm going to go slower. If I add power, I will climb, and if I remove power, I will fall or descend. Again, you've already heard about this when you were flying your normal landings. This is something you have to deal with every time that you do a landing. But it's very, very important that you remember this while you're doing a side slip, because if you come out of your slip and you're too fast, pulling power is not going to help. Your power is already at idle at this point before you began to maneuver. You're going to need to pitch up some to slow your aircraft down. So again, just to review everything that we've gone over here, we have talked about the slip to land. We've given you some resources, the Airplane Flying Handbook and Bold Method. Those are two great things to look at when going over this. We've talked about the difference between those different types of slips, intentional slips, a forward slip, a side slip. We've told you those definitions. We've also explained that it's different from skidding in the air, how this is a controlled maneuver, this is a controlled input by the pilot, and not just an lapse of memory or not paying attention. So this is actually good and not bad, like when you drift. We've talked about some rationale. We've hit just briefly on the aerodynamic principles involved, how you can increase your drag and lose your lift by banking and increasing the wind hitting your fuselage of your aircraft. We've talked about performing a slip, how you're going to pull the power to idle, bank into the wind, opposite rudder, and then let that slip take you down before removing the rudder, leveling your wings out, and then adding power just a little bit in. We've talked about some common errors, how you have to make sure you monitor your airspeed, and while you're actually in the slip, your airspeed may not be accurate, so do not make any abrupt changes. We've also hit on the region of reverse command, which is not really a common error, but something you need to be aware of, because you could end up putting yourself in a stall or a more dangerous situation by trying to add power or pitching the wrong direction when you want to land and come out of your slip. We've also talked about the ACS, how you're going to have to show good airmanship and make sure you are in total mastery of the aircraft, and we've recapped everything here. This is my last presentation for this class, so I hope you enjoyed it. Again, this is one of my favorite things to do when I take passengers flying. I love the reaction on their face. I hope everyone's staying safe and you have a great end of your semester.